Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name's James Ski. I'm the organizer of today's event. Can you just sense check and say hi? So if you can see the chat to the right, can you just say hi? Yeah, we can hear you. Or tell us where you're from, just so we know that we've kicked off. I'll shortly introduce Owen Richards, who is our lead sponsor, and he's actually going to be hosting today's event. So it's him who's going to be doing all the interviewing and asking all the questions. So thank you, Shabri. She's one of our guest speakers, so I know she's here. Who else is saying hi? You need to go to the stage section. Emily Jones, we are with you. Okay, that's a good start. So to the other 45 of you so far joining us, thank you very much for putting some time aside this afternoon. My name's James Ski. I'm the CEO and founder of Sales Confidence. And we've essentially built this valuable B2B sales community across the UK and Europe to help elevate the sales profession, but to help leaders, SDR managers, CEOs, founders like yourself understand how to build out that successful sales engine. Now, this is a bit of a one-off special today. Me and Owen, who is the founder of Air Marketing, got together a few months ago and started to think about what a lot of you needed to do, thinking about your plans for 2021 and how you're continually invested, particularly in building the SDR function out. So I'm really grateful for all of our guest speakers. After we've introduced Owen, we're going to run through the agenda for today. And we're also going to share why we put together this group of individuals in the format that we have. Ultimately, I will say, everyone is missed. We'd very much like to be doing this in person and having beers. One thing actually I did notice, I was eating my lunch earlier and I thought, I'm eating olives and garlic. I was eating raw garlic. And I thought that is one advantage of doing virtual events. You can get away with eating anything and not worry about it. So you won't notice any of that today. So as you will hopefully get a vibe, is we want to have fun with this as well. And we want to keep the atmosphere energetic. And you should get some key takeaways from this that Owen and I will wrap up at the end. So as I said, our lead host today is Owen Richards. He is the founder of Air Marketing, based down in Exeter, and they are the UK's leading business development and outsourced SDR service. So when you're thinking about building out your sales organization, and maybe you're thinking about a hybrid, or maybe you're thinking for additional lead generation services, Owen is your man, and he's going to guide us through today. Owen, would you like to just say hi and introduce yourself to everybody today?
Yeah, hi James. Really excited to be here. We've got a fantastic group of contributors lined up to talk today, and I think we're gonna be able to share some really good insight for people who are, I guess, either embarking on, have recently embarked on, or are going to embark on building out a sales function within their startup or their scale up. And yeah, it's really exciting to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent stuff. Well, good to see Aaron, Adam, Rodri, Steve, Sean, David. Keep saying hello. We've got David dialing in from France. So let us know where you're sitting in the world right now. As you would have seen in the build-up, we're very much talking about that journey, that process of building out the SDR function. So we've got to consider things like, how do you even map out the process or the strategy before you even hire that first individual SDR? What are the things you need to consider when sussing out the type of individuals you want to bring on board? And then what's the process for onboarding them effectively? How do you make sure you've got the right onboarding plan? How do you make sure you're doing effective training? And then how do you ensure once everybody is ramped that it's effectively delivering? So I know there's also some SDRs here. Maybe you're looking for tips to team lead individuals in your business. Maybe you're just looking for other people that are going through a similar experience to you. So we've split today into kind of 3 key parts, where Owen is going to be our lead host, where he's going to be interviewing a group of experts that have already been through this journey. In fact, some for the first time, and others that are much more experienced and have repeatedly delivered either onboarding, coaching, or developing of SDRs and sales teams. So first up, so the first interview that's going to start shortly is with Matt Sawyer, who is the co-founder of Clean.ai, and he's got his VP of Revenue, Greg Freeman, that have recently been through this journey. Owen, before we invite them on board, what was the reason we ended up getting Greg and Matt? Why did you think they would be interesting for this topic?
I think it was about timing. So I've known Greg for a long time, or for a reasonable amount of time anyway. Matt I met in lockdown when he spoke to me and was about to embark on the journey of building out a sales function after some funding. And he was ready to scale and was talking to us about some ideas to do that. He ended up bringing Greg into the team, somebody I already knew. Greg's built out a team during lockdown over this year and seems to be kicking some great goals. So they are right in the midst of the journey that we're talking about here now, with some really early stage successes. And I think it was something to highlight for them, because I think it's worth acknowledging how good a job they've done. But more importantly, it's current. It's people who are doing it right now, and who better to learn from than somebody that's in it at the moment.
Absolutely perfect. And it's challenging enough building and managing an SDR team without a global pandemic. So I think you're right, to get some real-time insights is going to be interesting to all of our guests to hear how they're living and breathing this. So I'm looking forward to that being our first part. And then the next stage, the next panel discussion, will get a bit more detail into the process of recruiting, onboarding, and also training SDRs. So for that, we've got Elaine Tyler, who runs a very successful SDR recruitment business out of the UK. Actually, congratulations to her. She just celebrated her 5-year anniversary as a business. So she's done this thousands of times in her career. So she's going to be helping you think about the right individual. Alongside her is Shabri, who is the founder of SalesWorks, and they're a leading sales training and development consultancy for SDRs, AEs, and CS. And she's got some fantastic frameworks. And actually, there's been a number of SDR management workshops that she's been running. So she does this every single day. So I guess between Owen and those two individuals, we thought we could share some insights for those that have to do it at volume, because they're basically living and breathing this every single day, and they're tasked by other companies to deliver. So that's going to be our second session. And then we're going to invite Richard Smith, who is the co-founder and head of sales at Refract, who are a call coaching software provider, and Julian Johns, who's a tenured 20-year sales veteran who has just done this time and time again. And also, most recently, he's actually dialing in from Norway. So we've got some international spirit today. So I think for now, there's enough from us, Owen. Let's now invite up Matt and Greg. So Matt and Greg, if you want to come on stage, just so everyone's aware of the process. Matt and Greg, I can see you, so I will shortly do the intro. What you can expect, everyone, is this, Owen is going to be leading this from a host and interview perspective, and I will disappear. You would expect each of these segments to run for 15 minutes, so short enough to keep your attention, but long enough to get a bit of depth. We expect that questions will come, so if you have questions during that, Owen will be able to navigate the stage and bring those into the discussion. So as Owen mentioned, Matt is the co-founder and chief data officer of Clean.ai, a company he co-founded a few years ago. They provide a solution to helping solve the data challenge simply, quickly, and efficiently. And maybe, Matt, you can share a little bit more about that. And naturally, as an early stage SaaS founder, he wanted to identify an individual that has built out and constructed successful sales teams. So today we've got Greg Freeman, who's the VP of Revenue, and also previously he was the VP of Sales at OneUp, which was a sales performance platform. So guys, thank you very much for getting involved today. I will leave you to Owen to drive this session. Good luck.
Thanks, James.
Cool, thanks.
Yes, James.
Hey guys, how's things?
Yeah, really good, mate. Busy day,
Good.
but yeah, really good. We're excited about our own webinar later as well. So it's a whole PM of webinars. So yeah.
And give it a quick plug. What's your webinar?
We've got a webinar with Jim Shark at 6 till 7 to hear about how they use data to take them on their scale journey.
Fantastic. Well, good that you got the plug out. Good luck sitting in front of a screen all afternoon, and hopefully you'll have a dry throat from all the talking later. We've got 15 minutes to get out as much value as possible, so I'm going to get straight into it. You guys have been on a journey this year from not having an in-house sales team to having a team of SDRs, and I've been really interested to observe that from the outside. Matt, if I start with you, if you don't mind, as a founder, you obviously had a trigger point to start that journey, and you had to think about what you needed to do to start that off. What was the starting point for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, the history of Clean is one of bootstrapped, sort of consultative-led selling, founder sales, your standard kind of bootstrap journey. I think probably resonates with quite a few people on the call. And we got to the point where we had real confidence in the product that we had built and the offering that we had for our prospects, but just no experience of go-to-market, of how to actually get it out there in front of that audience. Even the terminology, I've learned so many new acronyms. They're really confusing me, overlap with a bunch of acronyms in the data space. So it's actually confusing. But really being very aware of our own limitations in that space, knowing what we know and knowing what we don't know. We initially thought that we should sort of hit the ground running and try to do that, hire of a sales team directly in, and thankfully we didn't do that. I think it would have been a complete disaster had we had a sales team come in and sort of report directly into me with my complete lack of experience. I was introduced to Greg by someone I'm sure some people on the call will know well, a chap called Jerry Hill, an old mate of mine. So just that kind of cronyistic, who you know, not what you know. Jerry, mutual contact of mine and Greg's, did the introduction, and the conversation sort of went from there.
Brilliant, fantastic, and very smart move. I think I see so many founders think they can do it themselves, and it not only can it be hard, but it can also get in the way of everything else. And I think it's a smart move, particularly having found somebody as good and as experienced as Greg. So Greg, you came into a new business. I guess there was a certain process you needed to go through before you could even start thinking about bringing people on. Talk to me about some of those things you needed to have lined up before you hit the go button. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. You've got to do the work, and I think very relevant to being handed over to from Matt there. The first thing you've got to do when you're taking that role, and it's my favorite thing to do is come into a business as the first sales hire. It's something I really enjoy. But it's to manage the expectations, and that's not only manage the expectations as you when you're hired as the individual, but then manage the expectations around what an SDR team is going to deliver, what an outbound process is going to deliver. They chuck a fair chunk of money at it, actually. By the time you've hired 3 or 4 people, to get your SDR function going, including the person leading it, that's a decent chunk of cash up front. So the world's on fire. They're like, yeah, we'll be closing 20 deals by next month, and it just doesn't work like that. We all know that. So I think the first thing I had to do was manage the expectations, and it's quite a big taking a business on its data journey. It's not a small decision for them either. So it was always going to take some managing of expectations. I think from the practical things that you need to be doing, there's tons of them, but I tried to narrow it down to a handful that might be useful for people. So I think firstly, you need to know what qualities you're looking to build out in your team, what qualities you're hiring for, personality traits, experiences, and then align your interview to those. There's no point wanting to hire for ambition and then asking someone in their interview how they make a cold call. Like, those two things are completely disjointed. You need to be asking them what their ambitions are and find clever ways to get that without asking it so directly. You definitely need to build a playbook. Like, it's such a cliche again, but you need to build a playbook. You need to have that to guide you through the onboarding process. And my playbook does really guide my onboarding process. Actually, it's something they can refer back to at the end of the day, but actually it does massively guide the onboarding process. I think two things that are really linked are planning the time as a team to make sure you can do it effectively. So we took a 3-week window where we kind of took a pipeline hit, and we were like, look, we need to get hiring right, we need to get onboarding right. If I'm not doing deals in that time, if I'm not doing demos, that actually has to be fine, because long term it's going to pay off. And I think the big thing with that is that it's probably the most important point for me, which is show them that you care. Show the new hires that you care. Ultimately, you shouldn't just be throwing a wall and hoping some of them stick. You should be giving them the best opportunity to be successful. And that does take time. It does take energy. It does take coaching. So do plan a block of time to really focus on that hiring process, nurturing your hires. And then most importantly, once they're onboarded, focusing on their coaching and delivery.
And that's interesting, because it's about giving people the right tools, isn't it? You can bring really talented people in, give them the wrong tools, and they'll fail. So in real terms, what did that investment in terms of time and focus for you look like, Greg? So you came in on day one. How long was it before you were able to confidently say we're ready for SDRs now?
That's always the interesting bit, and I think it's different every time you do it. At OneUp, for instance, I would have said we were ready straight away. Like, I already knew coming into that business there was product market fit. It was ICP sorted, all that kind of stuff. There was still some iteration to be done. It's been more complex with Clean. It's a bigger project, bigger product, more like messy messaging in the data space. So we did a big whole piece of market research, spoke to, I think it was like 60 to 100 different businesses out there about what they need to do with analysis, what they need to do with data, what their data journeys have looked like. And we had to get all that done before we were able to actually go, Matt, Drew, I'm confident to now hire SDRs. And even since we've hired SDRs, the iteration we've gone through on the messaging and the process has been far more significant than I thought it was going to be. But I think it's just a side effect of the situation you find yourself in when you're first launching the team. It's the best market research you can ever do, really. 60, 100 calls a day is the best market research you can ever do. So
that'll do it. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you get people of different ilks that want to have everything right before they go, versus others who will jump head deep into something and work it out as they go. And is there a right or wrong in your view? Does it very much depend on the situation you're in?
I think you have to understand that there's a point where you've got to pull the trigger. Like, you've got to kind of get it. If you kind of get it, do it. Because that's the thing. Me sat there making X amount of calls a day is only speaking to 5-7 people a day. If you hire 3 people to then do that, it like massively multiplies the amount of conversations you have in the amount of learning you're doing. However, I think it's really important. And again, coming back to that, I believe if you're hiring SDRs, you shouldn't be throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. You've got to be setting them up for success. But part of setting them up for success is being transparent with them. Being the first couple of hires in a new business, in a new go-to-market, is bloody hard. Like, you're basically having to go way above your experience level to kind of digest what's happening and then feed that back to the senior team. So you do have to be transparent. Like, Aaron Wes, I think, might be on the call. Wes just gone to Portugal, so maybe not.
I've seen Aaron saying team clean with the
like, I was complete. If learning new messaging and it not being easy isn't for you, go join Outreach, because they've got a great message and they smash it loads of times. Like, it's that kind of thing. You've got to be honest with them. Like, don't be disingenuous. Don't sell them a dream that they can't live up to, kind of thing. So I think that's really important for the founders and the first sales management hire.
Thanks. And Matt, as a founder, I see so many people, and actually had an online debate with somebody openly on LinkedIn the other week, which I thought was a really healthy one, around how many hires do you put in first? Because there's a temptation to put in one. And what typically happens is you've got one person who can sink or swim, and you've got no benchmark. They've got a lack of collaboration, a lack of competition, a lack of environment to set them up for success. On the other hand, hiring a VP of revenue and 3 SDRs is an expensive process. And again, there's never a right or wrong with this, but talk to me about why you guys together made the decision that it was right to go out with multiples rather than take a stepping stone approach where you start and build on top of that.
Yeah, so I think really this, again, it speaks to our sort of lack of experience in this space. We had to really take the advice of, I mean, Owen, I know obviously you and I had a chat back then, pre-Greg joining the business, speaking to really great sales minds like Jerry. Jerry introduced me to a number of people. I had a number of conversations about this. But then it did come down to having, exactly as Greg said, you've got to take the plunge at some point. The going with somebody in a senior position with that experience like Greg was a sort of educated decision by that point. But Greg and I spent a pretty intense, probably 10 days, 2 weeks of communication with one another, where I mean it ended up becoming a little bit silly. I was sitting on the sofa with the wife at 10:30 at night on a Saturday, like surreptitiously chatting away to Greg on WhatsApp, and she's like, "Who's that? Is that Greg again?" I'm like, no, it's another woman. Like anything other than that. So yeah, it was really, really intense to understand what good would look like and understand what the process should be. And that was a two-way thing. I think I'm sure Greg would echo this, but giving Greg the confidence that we knew what we were doing in our space, and we were going to be able to give him the headspace and the support and the financial backing and so on to do what he needed to do to be set up for success. And then really building off that, exactly as Greg said, that market research, getting to a point where we were confident enough. You can never be 100%, right? Confident enough to pull the trigger and build that team in. And we were lucky with the sounds a bit disaster capitalist, but we're lucky with the situation that we found ourselves in. The amount of incredible talent in the London market for SDRs when we went to market. We only intended to hire 2. We ended up hiring three, and Aaron and Emma on the call, and Wes is sunning himself in Portugal somewhere. But they're incredible talent, and that's really testament to the process that Greg put in place. So it's a plunge that you've got to take, and you've got to trust it. Life is full of right?
Absolutely. And what about the focus on things like culture and environment? Because we can talk about process all day long, but you and I both know that environment, culture, climate, all of those things contribute to success in an SDR team or any sales team. So, Greg, from your perspective, how much does that come organically versus how much did you actually plan? I want the culture to look like this.
So like I come from an American football background in my sporting life, and there's a phrase in American football, culture over scheme every time, because American football has a terrible reputation for being too like technical and almost like chess, but for like humans hitting their bodies together. But actually the best programs are built on great culture and kind of camaraderie and support and performance culture. So it's somewhere that I focus a lot of my time. And we made a decision, even though like we were just hiring, like we made the appointments in the first week of June. And obviously everybody was actually available at that point. Wes had a 1 week notice, I think, but everyone was available. So we could have gone straight in then, but we had an inkling that the world and the economy was going to probably open up again in the first week of July. So we made a deliberate decision to delay the start date by a month. Made sure we really nurtured them through that journey. And that's really important. Treat it like, once you've made your appointment, treat it like a sales process. Keep them engaged, share information with them, like make sure they're not going to get the next person to slip into their DMs and offer them a couple of grand more, it's going to take them away. And when we decided to go off, we decided to come back to the office. And I think what it's done is it's allowed, the guys all refer to each other. It's like, oh, we're all like stepbrothers and sisters. Like they've built that really quickly by being in the same place and having that enjoyment. But I think, again, because the American football thing, it's like a coaching first culture in essence. Like I massively believe in coaching. It's such a big part of American football. And we're building a very like open forum in terms of just come grab me if you want coaching. Like we have fixed coaching points in the week. That's again more difficult from a distance. But the bit I think that you were really getting by being being a culture together at the moment is, oh Greg, I need you to look at this email for me. I've just had this conversation. Like, what should I have said instead? And I think that's the bit that's the focus on culture that's important to me. The kind of coaching first, always open door culture.
Brilliant. Guys, I think we could talk for about an hour about this easily and probably keep pulling value out. I'm sure that you guys are happy to answer questions if people have got them. Last thing before we move on to the next people, loads of value in 15 minutes and we're rushing. Top tip or biggest challenge from each of you. So Matt, from your perspective as a founder, what was having looked back over the last few months, what's your either top tip or the biggest challenge to be aware of to another founder in the same scenario?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot. I think top tip is trust your gut on the hire.
Yeah.
I think I'm a data person, so that's kind of crazy for me to say, but with people, you really do have to trust that instinct with hiring, and I actually did that with Greg. He then provided me a mountain of evidence of why he's good. Though I still haven't seen his CV, so. Really that.
Hasn't got one.
Still lies. And biggest challenge really, I mean, for us, it's very much what Greg touched on. It's the complexity of the product and the complexity of the go-to-market messaging.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And Greg, you coming into a new organization and going quick, really hard and fast in the new organization. What was your biggest challenge?
Yeah, I'm going to take it from making that decision to join a company. Two things. Joining a company that has no proven outbound and commercial model is a massive risk. So do not be afraid to ask really deep and meaningful questions. Ask to see the clients, ask to see the revenue number, ask to see the books, all that kind of stuff. It's genuinely worth it to make sure you're making the right decision, and then manage the expectations. It's exactly what I started with, but manage the expectations. An outbound model is only really going to deliver true value, in my opinion, probably 12 months later when you've had chance to have like the feedback loop of inbound causes outbound, causes inbound, causes outbound, and builds partner model, etc. If you go in and promise the world and say you will be closing £1 million worth of revenue in the next 6 weeks, you're only setting yourself up for failure. And if your founders aren't willing to listen to it, they're not the right people to join.
Yeah, brilliant. Guys, thank you very much. James, right on cue. Well done.
Thank you, guys. Great insights there. We'll look to summarize some of those points at the end. I've taken some useful notes there. If you just want to click your leave buttons and stay in the background. Thanks, guys. Those that have just seen that, look, feel free to ask questions in the chat because Greg and Matt will be available, and let's keep that engagement going. So Shabri and Elaine, if we can invite you into the mix, please, if you can click your join button. So just as another introduction, Elaine, as I mentioned, is the founder of Venatrix, which is the UK's leading sales and SDR recruitment business. And Shabri is the CEO and founder of SalesWorks, UK's leading provider of sales development, training and consultancy for SDR and sales companies. So I'll leave you guys to it. Cheers.
Thanks, James. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello. Right, let's get straight into it because I'm conscious that 15 minutes goes really quickly. So, Elaine, I'm going to start with you. I know the answer is Venatrix, but try and work around this for me. Let's say we're hiring an SDR team for the first time, just like Greg has just done. Where do you start? Where do you look? And give an objective opinion on the agency versus direct versus your network options.
Okay, so first of all, when you're starting to look for anything, I think it's really important to actually understand what it is that you're looking for. And, certainly in my experience of working with SDRs, I think that it's really important for businesses to accept the fact that it might be better to hire somebody with limited or no real commercial experience. So I think that sometimes there can be this kind of like false economy, a bit of a red herring that maybe trying to find an SDR with that magic 6 to 12 months experience who's going to drop into your business and then be super successful might be the key to getting a quick return quicker return than you would do otherwise. But certainly in my experience, I think that actually looking for candidates who don't necessarily have that background pays more dividends for you in the long term. I mean, of course, there are like career-based SDRs, but when you're looking at kind of finding that junior sales talent for your team, I think defining that that's what you're looking for is then going to make it easier to source. So in terms of how we go about like looking for candidates specifically, a lot of what we do is via our network. So I think that, you know, putting our brand where these people that are genuinely, intelligent, smart, entrepreneurial people online helps us actually attract good candidates. So, for example, our affiliation with Sales Confidence actually really helps us attract candidates, and that's kind of a bit of a brand management exercise as opposed to going to seek for candidates on job sites, because those candidates are quite often being interviewed by lots of different companies or not necessarily kind of in-demand candidates. So I think it's kind of a network-based approach brings the best results. And obviously, naturally, run Venatrix. The truth is that to hire an SDR, we screen about 100 people. So, aside from our expertise, what we really offer is a time-saving capacity because as we've identified, it can be a bit of an exercise of trying to understand about somebody's background instead of somebody's experience. Having somebody do that as a third party on your behalf can obviously save you a lot of time if you're trying to get your SaaS startup off the ground. That's my thoughts anyway.
Thank you. That's a really good summary. Shabby, let's talk about what a good SDR looks like. You've managed a fair few, and you've trained a fair few as well. So if you've never hired SDRs before, what are some of the, how do you know what right looks like? What are some of the things that you would be looking for, the types of traits and personalities that you'd be qualifying in or out?
I think that's a great question. And, I'll start by saying I've made some bad hiring decisions in the past. So you don't get it right 100% of the time. The lessons I've taken away from that are, though, go with your gut, right? So if someone is a maybe, that they're probably not worth hiring, especially if you look at the risk that startups can afford to take. So I think that's quite low. I think, echoing what Elaine says, I think it's important that you design your recruitment process around the objective of your team. So I often ask sales leaders, what's the mission statement of your SDR team? I'm mostly met with blank faces, if I'm honest, because I think people don't think about it as a mission statement. So, some of the mission statements that I've had before for teams are, I'd like them to be the talent bench for the wider sales organization. So if that's the case, then hire someone with the right attitude and aptitude and hire raw talent. My caveat on that is that has to be paired with the right training and development program. And I know we'll get onto that. So when I look for a good SDR, I'm looking at traits that they can display, not through competency-based questions, because I think that people can read online what a right, competency-based answer would be. They get help from recruiters, they get help from their friends. So I'm actually looking to see a display of that. So one thing that I love to do is include a written assignment or written assessment that actually shows their drive. And I think often we forget this, that it's not just us interviewing candidates, they're interviewing us as well, right? It's a hugely competitive environment right now. And so one thing I'm looking to see is drive, hunger for the role. We also underestimate how much time, or I think we overestimate rather, how much time candidates spend on our company website, right? Do they get it? And I'm looking for those non-coachable skills like drive, hunger, resilience, grit. And so, whether it's, can you take a look at our website and, persona, an email to a persona and come up with what a value proposition might be. And I'm not looking for the right answer, but I'm looking for the fact that they, give a shit. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on this. So
go for it. You say what you like.
That's what I'm looking to see. And I think that's something that's really difficult to coach.
Yeah.
All the objection handling stuff, you can coach, right? So I think those are some of the traits that I look for as I hire SDRs.
Thank you. Elaine, Shabby's touched on something really interesting there, which is around the recruitment process and the fact that we're selling to SDRs as much as they're selling themselves to us. You must see all sorts of really good recruitment processes, great people who focus on their employer brand and are absolutely top of the list for SDRs out there looking for a role, and others who think they've got all of that right and they're a million miles away. What would be your advice to somebody who's hiring SDRs for the first time in terms of employer brand and recruitment process?
Yeah, certainly. So I think that the part of the offering that the SDRs do focus on the most is the mission, the journey, and the future potential. Like, I think, sometimes people can get caught up around like, what benefits packages are we going to put in place to attract?
What's the basic? Is £1,000 either way or whatever.
Yeah, like that type of stuff, or also like, the additional benefits. I think though they are like cool and they're nice, what candidates are really interested in is what part can they play in helping build this organization. So I think it's really important to get all the stakeholders together who are involved in the interview process and make sure that everybody completely understands those three elements and are able to communicate it throughout the process. And then in terms of the actual process, slick and quick. So make sure, like, before you actually start the process, have the time earmarked in the relevant people's diaries, as no doubt they're busy, of when they might actually be interviewing candidates. So it doesn't end up kind of, oh, we found somebody, when are we going to try and slot them in? Because that doesn't feel very organized to the candidate. And then curate a 2 or maximum 3-stage process, I would say, at this level, where everybody taking part in the process fully understands what their role is, what they're going to be discussing in terms of, like, for example, the job or the company mission or different case studies, and that's clearly assigned to each person so that they can take ownership of that. And it means that information isn't getting recycled and repeated through different Zooms that nobody knows what's happened in one of them to the next, because obviously that's boring, not very engaging, and doesn't get the person excited or, again, feel organized. So think about how you're going to test the candidate, then obviously think about how you're going to sell to the candidate and put yourself in the candidate's shoes, and make sure that you've really thought about how it's going to feel as a candidate through each of those stages. And obviously, most importantly, the crucial job offer process, if you get there. Yeah,
brilliant. Fantastic. And I think it's a really interesting point, because so many people lose out on good candidates because of that process. And a week is a long time, isn't it? So if you're waiting a week to go back with people and you're not communicating, particularly at the moment, there are lots of people hiring, lots of people on the market, lots of movement. So a lot can happen in that time. Somebody's asked a question here, which I think is actually really relevant. So I'm going to slot it in, which is, with more talent on the market, Johnny Adams, this is from, with more talent on the market due to redundancies, how can you as an interviewer or a hirer separate the desperate from the real true candidates that want to work for your organization, considering that candidates are probably more likely at the moment to be sending out high volume of applications rather than a more targeted one? I think that's a really timely question. Have you got any thoughts on that, either of you?
Yeah, I think basically, I do think that you will know. So we get lots of outreach at the moment from people who might be in different job circumstances than they would have been previous. And you can really tell that authentic message that somebody's like thought about approaching you with about why they want to be an SDR in a technology company. Normally, I think if they don't feel that that actual passion about the opportunity, they list their experience.
Yeah.
So they kind of list their experience in a message, and they're kind of like using that as an advert to promote themselves instead of thinking about like why would apply for this job. So I think that might be a good telltale.
I like Mike's response. Mike Appleby's, but is a desperate candidate in a bad candidate in a pandemic? That's an interesting question. I think that's a whole other conversation for another time, but it's an interesting observation. So let's just focus on the ones you've got people in, because it's great to land in Matt and Greg's case here, 3 SDRs, off we go, fantastic, and just assume that they're going to drive pipeline in 6 months' time. You're going to be rolling in positive pipeline and sales. Shabri, you know better than that. It's a tough journey. What should you be thinking about in terms of budgeted costs, but also time and energy and effort in terms of how to hire, onboard, and train a team of SDRs? Because there's a lot in that piece, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. And I think this is something that I see day in, day out. We work with a lot of organizations at their onboarding phase. And, often I, ask sales leaders, what's your goal in onboarding? And I get a ton of different answers. And to me, I think the goal of onboarding is it's to fuel you to be productive in your first month and to help you grasp the fundamentals. And I still, unfortunately, see a lot of companies think, okay, well, onboarding, they'll be fine with some product training, and that's it. right? And so I think that we need to move away from that whole product training aspect and think about onboarding across your company and your culture, so the kind of who's who and understanding how to navigate through the organization. I think it's then industry training, because we can't really efficiently and effectively have conversations with our prospects unless we understand their industry and the challenges they face. And then I think there is product, but I always recommend that product is delivered by sales or marketing or commercial people as opposed to product-led feature function training. And then lastly, it's all the soft skills. And I think the soft skills are something that still needs to be worked on, right? So objection handling is not something you can learn in 2 hours, right? You know, building rapport is not something you can learn in 2 hours. And so I think leaders have got to play a more hands-on role in the coaching, which I know is what we're going to talk about later. But also understanding what is the fundamentals and how do we break these down into building blocks. So, you know, I often say to leaders, if you don't have time to train and coach SDRs, don't hire them, right? That's what companies like Owens are for. But that's, you know, that's something that I continually see happen is let's hire them, and then you're left 6 months later with disgruntled, demotivated SDRs. And so, you know, from a timing perspective, yes, there is, you know, 1, 2, 3 weeks up front, but there's also the ongoing continuous element there as well. And if you think about the average tenure of an SDR being 14.2 months, you can't spend 6 months onboarding, right? You're not going to make that effective. So Greg talked about playbook earlier. Think about how you can codify that playbook and then map that out to competency-based training.
Yeah, thank you. And I had a couple of other questions which you've kind of wrapped up into there. So instead of taking those, I'm just going to fire into one in the chat, which is from Michael Wilcox, who said, what should an SDR interview process look like now that you can't always meet them face to face? So Elaine, I might fire that at you, because I guess you're at the forefront of seeing that change this year and carrying on with the recruitment process. What does it need to look like now? What's changed? Yeah,
certainly. So, I mean, obviously, start with the CV screen, because you want to make sure that the person's got the attention to detail and communication skills, that when they put together the most important document of their life, they can manage it. And then secondly, from there, in terms of our process, we normally then kick it off with a quick phone screen to understand whether the candidate has the right energy and if they're articulate enough, and if they've also got a good understanding of the role that they're actually applying for, again, to kind of weed out those people who haven't actually understood what role they want to do. And then from there, the initial stage of the Venatrix process is then a deep dive into that candidate's background. So understanding a little bit about their whys and wherefores and the decisions that they've made so far in their life around either attending university, not attending university, what degree, what subject, a bit about who maybe has inspired them. And then like a discussion where you perhaps invite them to name the competencies that they're going to need to demonstrate in order to be successful in the job. And then, as Shabri says, bring to life those tangible examples where you can see how they've actually played those competencies out. Then we also talk to people about their motivations and understand that they're going to be in line with doing the job of an SDR and what you're able to offer as the business. And then also kind of checking the reality around how hireable they are. So are they in other processes? When are they actually looking to start a job? When are they, are they realistic about attending a second interview, and have they made the right commitments in their own mind to getting this process underway? Obviously, I'm talking about very junior people here. Then if they pass through that, then an exercise is always a good idea. So I've seen some fantastic exercises that our clients put people through, from a role play qualification call to a presentation around a value proposition to teach me something, tell me something, give me a presentation on something you feel passionate about. I guess whatever suits you. And, if you've aligned with your stakeholders around the competencies that you're looking to assess, that will give you some guidance there. And then potentially, a team fit interview from there, where you bring in other individuals from the organization, give the candidate the experience of what it would be like to work in your company. And we've, over the lockdown period, and whilst face-to-face meetings have not taken place, placed 120 people, and not single interviews happened face-to-face in that time, nice. Including for Clean AI, in fact. So there we go.
Very good indeed. I love it. Good little testimonial there, guys. The questions are coming in. thick and fast. And I'm sorry that I can't bring them all in, but what I would say is to the guys on the panel, could you jump into the stage chat and start to just contribute? Very difficult for me to do. I'm capable of one thing at a time. So if you guys can just handle some of those questions, guys, there's 4 good questions in there. One from Andy McDonald, one from Brian, one from Alex, one from Mike Appleby. Be good to just get the chat going around those if you wouldn't mind, because I think we're going to have to move on to the next group now. But thank you so much for your contribution, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's not an easy job.
Woo, it's hot.
You're on point. It's magic. Just for everyone listening, I've been taking notes on what we're doing. So we've got one more panel discussion, and then what Owen and I will do, Owen, to give you some headspace, I'll just summarize some of the points that we've taken away from today. Just for everybody online, I'm actually loving the engagement here. And so I think you're going to learn a lot from each other at the end of the session. So at 3:30, you can get involved in networking. You can see on your right of your screen, there's a networking button. So when Owen and I are wrapped up, this event goes until 4 p.m. And that's the opportunity to actually connect with some other people, add them on LinkedIn, and then find out more. So our final panel conversation now, it's really great to have Richard Smith, who's the co-founder and head of sales of Refract. And he's been building a conversational intelligence business over the last few years, which really now has set the mark and come alive because of the result of remote working. So, day in, day out, he's listening to calls and getting underneath the skin of what it takes to be effective in sales. Julian Johns, who is the VP of sales of a company in Norway now called Memory, and he's been a stalwart and champion, I would say, of the SDR. And actually, I just want to point this out because it's quite personal, this community we've put together. And Julian was one of the individuals who arrived very early on, many years ago, to get behind us going into an SDR and champion the SDR, because it's such an important function. And a few weeks ago, we did that where we announced the top 50 SDRs in the UK. And if you haven't checked that out, go and check that out on the channel. So great to have you on board, guys. Owen, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, James. How's things, guys? You all right?
Very good, thanks. Not bad at all.
Good. Well, you've seen from the last half an hour that we need to just fire here, because otherwise we end up getting through about a third of the questions that I think we should and the points. So let's kick into it. Richard, I'll start with you. Massive question. So you have to be careful as to how you answer this, because it could take 10 minutes easily. What's the best way to coach SDRs, particularly, I guess, in these times when most are now working from home, so they're quite cut off, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think for many SDRs, when you say cut off, Owen, they've been cut off since they've joined the company. If they've been hired this year, and I'm speaking with SDRs who haven't even, met their colleagues in person or in their boss, and appreciate different companies are in different situations. And it's a bit of a lonely place. They're kind of sat at home in their spare bedrooms like I am right now, or on their kitchen tables, and trying to kind of figure it all out as they go along. They've been through their onboarding, and now it's kind of like, okay, go ahead and generate some pipeline for us. I think key really is about engagement. SDRs have never needed their managers and their peers more than they do now. A lot of them, not all, are very young people just starting their career in sales, and so they just need to feel connected. It's amazing, obviously, as well as some of our customers. I'm sure Julian will talk about Refract specifically, but a lot of our customers are just we're seeing just using Zoom really effectively as part of the coaching process. Doing things like team role play sessions on Zoom with new hires. One of the things that we do here at the team here at Refract is, and this has been a kind of a stalwart of our cadence every week for months now, is team coaching every Friday morning. Everyone gets on Zoom. We play calls out, in front of the whole group. I almost act as the kind of the composer, if you like, and just let the team kind of stop and start and give their opinions on, what's working in the calls, what they're hearing, sharing ideas. And even, a lot of coaching that we're seeing at the minute is just being done remotely, doing things like practice sessions. You're buddying up SDRs with each other, getting them on a Zoom session, and just doing like an hour of role play with each other, and just getting super comfortable with that. But yeah, I think really key in all of this is just engagement. It's about managers stepping up to the plate and just making sure that their team are feeling well supported, especially in these times when they're cut off from their team.
I guess you've got to be constantly evolving the process, because if it's not engaging and they haven't got that organic around them all the time, it's so easy for it to become repetitive, the same stuff, and to disengage from that process. Julian, from your perspective, what do you do to keep the process engaging when it comes to coaching your team?
Well, I think the first thing is actually that I do actually spend time coaching them, and as a VP, it's tough because you don't have the time, as much time as you'd like to have. And then one of the earlier participants talked about you're building a brand new outbound sales function. That's exactly what we're doing here. You think you have enough time, and then suddenly hours get eaten away. And so, so the first thing is actually you should spend time. But I also realized, and I certainly held my hand up very quickly here, I can't do it all myself. So I'll take them through the BDR playbook or the sales playbook, and and every quarter we'll reiterate that. So there's always some fresh stuff coming, and they have to bring things they've learned. So that keeps them engaged, right? They can't just sit back. Clearly with Refract, the biggest challenge I had is that while I've been a huge fan of Refract for a couple of years now, I don't have the time to do all of that coaching myself. So I've made sure that I've clearly through Refract they have a great relationship with a guy called John Richardson, who we've now used to do the one-to-one coaching through the platform. So I can step away a bit, actually, and it really helps because they can get the one-to-one stuff with John through Refract, right? All the calls, etc., and all the analysis, and then they come to me and they go, "Hey, why don't we try this? Can we do this?" And that keeps them energized, because I don't have all the answers. I really don't, and so it's nice to have that loop of inspiration, which is kind of comes from somebody outside. So for me, it's
brilliant.
Yeah, if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's absolutely great. Thank you. And if you think about a new SDR, and I'm looking at that front end, because we talked about what do you do before you hire, then we talked about the hiring and onboarding process. Let's look at that first 3 months. There's not a right and a wrong answer, and I think it's very dependent on the type of product you're selling and the market you're working in, and all those sorts of things. But what's a good amount of coaching to give an SDR in that 3 months? Because I've seen people overdo it and not let them go and learn and do it on the job, and equally I've seen people leave alone, and Shabby talked about that, and you just expect disaster. Well, where do you sit in terms of what's right and what's wrong? I'd be interested to hear briefly from both of you on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I do think you're right there, Owen. There's kind of maybe a risk of feeling like you're kind of just mothering the SDR too much and not letting them kind of make mistakes. And if I just think back to my career, I learned by making mistakes, by having, people hang up on me and messing up my words on calls and people not responding to emails. It's kind of part of your whole coaching and learning is you can't learn if you don't kind of learn to fail, first of all. So I'm a big believer of just letting people try stuff, but also letting people try stuff that is new, that we haven't tried before as a team. And I encourage SDRs to say, hey, if you think you've got new ideas for even things like call openings or whatever they may be, I'm not going to stand in their way. I say, here, try it out. Like so much of sales and prospecting is split testing, and we have to obviously keep as current as possible. So I think for me, that definitely in the early stage of an SDR's career is where they need the most coaching. Like it's just you've got to get them, that intensity has got to be higher. But I think it's the right balance of maybe spending like an hour a day just doing that coaching, but then the rest of the time just letting them actually execute. And then the next day, kind of revisiting how they executed and whether there's more refinement. So, and I think once you start to get in a position, from my experience, when they're becoming consistent of just generating those appointments, they may not be smashing it out the park, but they're showing that they've got that rhythm and that they've kind of getting it. Then it becomes, less of a daily thing than maybe more of just a weekly occurrence. I don't know. Julian has different experiences there.
No, I mean, I've made a very conscious effort to hire experienced SDRs here, because to your point, I didn't have the time to give them the opportunity to learn what the intensity is like, because the SDR role, I'm a huge advocate of it. It's the best gateway to understanding how a business performs, to allow you then to become NAE, into marketing, into support. You know, it really is a fantastic entry into the role of how a business operates. I didn't have the luxury, unfortunately, of bringing brand new people. So on the flip side, how can I then make their ramp up more successful? And for me, it was understanding, well, how can they make connections quickly with other people in the business to help them be successful? So they have to do is 2 weeks ramp up in terms of training, but not intense. And then towards the end of the second week, they have to write their own competitor matrices. They have to understand some key messaging points and personas. But I tell them it's already been written before, and there are 2 people in the business they have to speak to that they haven't spoken to already to complete it. And so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, because why should they? It's already out there. But guess what? People don't like working from blank slate anyway. So as a result of that, the collective knowledge improved. People knew and could connect. So that's the main thing of the first 2 weeks. And then the coaching periodicity within in memory is that we have a 2-week team session on Refract primarily, but then we also have weekly sessions on a Friday where we go through some discos, discovery calls, ICP, what went wrong with the ICP. It's because I can talk about process rather than about the application of their daily role at this stage. So it's much easier for me to go onto that quicker with experienced SDRs.
So how quickly do you get to the point where you think that coaching is working and have an impact versus, you know, I guess the question is, everybody coachable versus, hang on, I'm putting a lot of time into this person, we're not moving forward. So have you got a sense check on how long that process could take if it was worst case?
Yeah, it's a classic case of most companies aren't actually measuring coaching effectiveness. Obviously, the massive leading indicator is, are the results going in the right way? Of course, like, are those meetings getting booked? Are they the right quality of meeting? Are those meetings holding when they're getting scheduled? But I think I say this a lot, Owen. Like, when it comes to coaching, is like, you can't just make the mistake that many sales leaders have of just coaching by the numbers, saying, okay, you only got these results, you need to do
more.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, you know, anybody can look in a CRM, and any even intelligent SDR who's out of university, or even, you know, just in their first job in sales, is intelligent enough to look at the reports and the dashboards and see, okay, my results weren't where they needed to be. The key is understanding why you got those. And it sounds so simplistic, but all of the answers are in their activity, in the specifics, you know, whether it's looking at their written outreach, or whether it's just looking at the calls. One of the things that we do in Refract in our product is you can create simple scorecards saying, okay, these are the things the things that we are measuring you're against on your prospecting calls. It could be your call openings, it could be your positioning statement, it could be your objection handling, and it could be how you know, even things like your tonality. And we're basically grading the calls. Like, some people might feel that's old school. I'm saying it's actually really, it helps make it measurable, helps give the SDR some tangible idea of, okay, I know I'm super strong in my call openings, but the thing that I need to work on is understanding when to close the prospect down for a meeting and what to say, because that's what I scored less on. And the following week, the key thing as a manager is to say, okay, I'm going to do a call coaching session with the SDR. Before I jump in, let's remind myself of where they scored last time around. Okay, we identified this was the specific development area. What I'm looking for is seeing if they've made progress in that area. And that's the key. That's how you know that coaching has been effective, because if they have taken on board the coaching, if they found it valuable, they will put it into practice. If they aren't putting it into practice, it usually tells me one of two things. One, they may be lacking in their coachability, or secondly, the coaching, the guidance, the feedback you gave as a manager was not on point. But all of the answers as far as measuring effectiveness, it's in what they're actually doing in practice, and you have to inspect to figure that out.
Yeah, brilliant. So can SDRs self-coach? So it's all on leaders to coach. Huge amount of time and resource. We talked about an hour a week, so that tells you very quickly or an hour a day, sorry. So if you've got 8 SDRs, you're suddenly out, or 7 SDRs, you're not doing anything else, are you? So, you know, it's a time-intensive thing in the early stages. Is there a way of getting SDRs to self-coach and contribute to that journey themselves? Julian, what about your experience with that?
I think yes, absolutely. I think as long as you've given them the opportunity to understand what metrics it is you'll measure them against, and they have a full, clear, and transparent understanding of what that means. So, whether it's scorecards and Refract, whether it's core connect times within outreach that we use, get them to understand, okay, when are you performing best? How are you performing best? What scenario? What was it about that particular way you handled that call that helped you perform best? Now, again, it all starts with the hiring process. You have to hire people who are open to understanding they can learn. And as Elena was talking about, it's more than just their experience. Are they willing to understand that their job title? Are they willing to show that they can learn and be adaptable? I'm extremely fortunate that most of the SDRs that I've ever worked with, every single one of them wants to improve, the low performing and the high performing ones. And so they're always looking for something. And the second thing I've always worked out, SDRs as a crew are wonderfully supportive. And I'm sure I heard something Richard say this. I'm going to paraphrase you, Richard, so apologies. Talking about being competitive, while it involves other people, actually is about yourself. If you can raise your own game, compete against yourself, then everybody else raises their talent levels. And so you look for that contribution that they make to their own performance, and you also hold them accountable for it. Because we hire adults, right? We do hire adults. We're not hiring kids, we're hiring adults. They've got a job to do. So for me, it's like you combine that together with that autonomy that you give them. Clearly, you coach them. You give them the tools they need. You don't let them on their own. But yeah.
Just add on to this as well, Owen, about how can you get SDRs like just learning them, like self-learning. We're seeing massive value right now, especially in these kind of remote times when, as I said, a lot of people are working from home, cut off. They don't have their kind of like peer sat next to them, their mate that they can tap on the shoulder and kind of debrief a call that just went miserably wrong. Is just by sharing the wins. Like, so, one of the features that we've just launched is the ability to that. Let's imagine an SDR's just booked a call that's resulted in a meeting, is that everybody in that Slack channel to get a recording of the conversation that led to that meeting. And so like what you're doing there is you're coaching just by spreading the wins of like, here's a call that's literally just taken place in, a town down the road with your peer, and here's what it sounds like. And, you can learn so much by just listening to what's working in your team. That whole, as Julian said, it's that tribe mentality of supporting each other, and just simply take, I've said this a lot in sales, take what's working, use it yourself, and model yourself on the best.
Before the police turns up, here comes James, ready to tell us off. There's a really interesting question, and I want to do a really quick answer to it. Brian has asked, what's a realistic target for monthly meetings booked for an SDR team? Is there a benchmark for products or industries? I think it's a really good question. The answer is, of course, it varies depending on whether you're targeting enterprise, what your ACV is, all that kind of stuff. But maybe we can just give some examples. I mean, my experience in enterprises, it might be 3, 5, 7 a month. In if your target market's SME, it might be 20 a month. It's pretty broad, but I wanted to at least ask the question. Rich, Julian, can you just give like what your targets are in your business as a benchmark or a round arm swing so people get a sense of it?
Yeah, I can quickly share in ours. I mean, we primarily serve mid-market, and we fully ramped SDR. We're looking at around about 5 qualified appointments per week, so 20 a month.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, though, that if you're prospecting the enterprise, there's probably lower expectations than that.
For me, it's 12.
Yeah, there you go. So that gives you a range, guys, depending on your sales value. We have clients whose sales values £250,000 ago, and
of course.
if you're getting 1 or 2 quality opportunities a month, then everybody's laughing if they're closing in good times. So I think if somebody's getting to a point that they've got more than 1 a day, then you're really kicking goals in any market.
Exactly.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Julian.
Cheers, Julian.
Thanks to all the speakers. Some huge amount of nuggets there. And Owen, I'd like us to broaden the conversation, a bit of a summary of today. So, maybe you can give your thoughts for a moment, and I'll talk through some points. And also, I think naturally, not that we teed this up, but it'd be interesting to just get your perspective on the opportunity to outsource and set up a hybrid model, because what I've learned from the chat and the discussion is that there is lots of individuals that are embarking on the first time. And just to say, we're never sure when we come up with the ideas to put this content together if we're going to tick the boxes. And I'm glad, because I've been sitting behind the scenes seeing how broad the advice has been. And there's just been some interesting points early on that I thought Greg brought about around the importance of coaching first, and the expectation, and Julian mentioned this as well, that even if you're the leader of the organization, you know, maybe you're typically a couple of rungs away from the SDR, it's still so important for you to get involved and be available. And I like Greg talking about making himself available. You know, I guess in the office, someone can walk over to you, but actually it's encouraging the SDRs to be proactive, even if they're not sitting next to you. And Richard made that good point about celebrating wins. At the end of the day, if we're all sitting silently in our rooms, we don't know what's happening unless we bring it to the table. So I thought that was good. Owen, feel free to bring any points.
No, I just on that, connecting with management founders, I think it's a really interesting point. One of the things that we did in lockdown was created a buddy system where we mixed people with a different person each week to do a 10-minute one-to-one at the beginning of the day with somebody different in the business. So you might have me as the founder linked with one of our junior SDRs in a week, and then linked with an account manager the next week, and an account manager linked with a senior SDR. And it really mixed it up, and it meant that people were having conversations with people that they otherwise might not be connected to in the day-to-day, particularly where they might be in the office because it would happen organically, but in the day-to-day when it's virtual, they weren't. And I thought that was a really good, a really successful way of keeping everybody connected in the business and keeping everybody collaborating at different levels.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the point to educate your new sales individuals to think beyond sales and be buddying up with others in the organization is really important. Shabri, I thought, made an excellent point around the mission statement. So, you know, I think there's a lot of conversation about the purpose of the overall company, the vision that the company, the leadership have set out. But what is the mission statement for your sales org or your SDRs that they're getting behind as an organization? And she talked about being a benchmark for talent. So some of you are leading teams where there are other teams of salespeople or SDRs in your organization. So maybe you're working for a US organization and you're responsible for the team here in the UK or Europe. You know, so how are you setting the bar in terms of the talent that you're bringing in? I thought was an important point. There was a lot of points around the process and speed. Definitely, while there has been some points that naturally there's more talent available in the market, and I think, you know, people deserve the opportunity, and there's always going to be a right fit somewhere. So, you know, yes, job hunting might be more of a volume game. At the end of the day, it's about finding a match, and you've got to go through that match. But I think speed and making sure the process is rapid, I think, was some really good points from Elaine. Have you got anything to
yeah, you know, there's a running theme through all of this that I think has stuck out for me, which is around, you know, this is a big investment, and we have to have sensible expectations around what's possible in every stage. So you'll notice that when we talked about coaching, we didn't talk anywhere near as much about how coachable people. We talked about the process and the things we need to give them, the environment and the support we need to give them. When we talked about recruiting, we didn't just talk about you know, what we are looking for. We had to talk about what do we need to have in place, and it was the same before you hire a team of SDRs. And I think Greg touched on the expectation around timeframes. You know, hiring a team of SDRs internally or indeed outsourcing isn't a quick fix. It takes time. You know, if you've got a 3-month sales cycle, don't be foolish to think that from day one, in 3 months, we're going to get a return on this investment. You know, look at Matt. He's made a big investment, 3 SDRs, a VP of revenue, all the processes, all the sales tech that goes behind that, all the new processes and things he's had to invest in, not to mention recruitment fees and things just to get people there. If his expectation is that return comes in 3 months, he might as well not bother in the first place. He's got to be thinking about this as a 12-month plus journey, but also setting some sensible milestones along the way that say, I want to achieve this by then, I want to achieve this by then. But I think it's about, it's that mirrors thing, isn't it? We talk about mirrors in leadership, and reflecting the mirror back on yourself. What have I got to do to make this a success? And part of that is about having realistic expectations on the process. What am I going to achieve by when? And setting that out before you go, so that you don't get caught in that trap of why is it not working yet? Well, how are you defining working at this point in time? And all three touched on that investment from you as an organization, as a founder, as a sales leader, there's a lot of energy that goes into this, and it is not easy, and you have to go into it with that mindset so that you continue to invest the energy, effort, and in some cases capital that's needed to make it work, rather than it just being about floating people in, and of course they'll make loads of sales really quickly, which just is never the case.
No, absolutely great summary on the expectation management. So just for those of you that are remaining with us, we're going to head into the networking section in a minute, and our speakers will be available until 4 p.m. So that's a good opportunity to get a couple of minutes with each speaker and to get underneath a little bit more in the detail of your questions. But I want to thank all the speakers today. They've been fantastic. Owen, incredible hosting skills today. Can you just give us a little bit more, just from your own experience, offering an outsourced service? What are the considerations that people need to think about, and where and why and when is it an option that works?
Yeah, good question. I think that sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. I think we have to be realistic about this. If you take Clean as an option, they had outsourced their in-house as an option. I think Greg was the defining factor for that. In that Matt openly said, "I'm so glad I didn't hire people to report into me directly." And I think it comes down to, if you are ready to make the investment in hiring a sales leader to build that team for you for the first time, then hiring the right sales leader, believing them and letting them do it their way is important, and giving them the trust to do that. If you're not ready to make that extra investment on top, if you're doing it for the first time, if you want to benchmark an internal team, then outsourcing can be an option. And I think quite often organizations aren't set up to want to take the cost of recruitment, to have the resource of onboarding, to be able to do that coaching that Richard talked about. There's a lot of investment of time and energy and money there, and sometimes that's not right for an organization to do that internally. So I'd be silly to sit here and say outsourcing is always the right option, but I certainly think if you're looking at building an in-house or an SDR function, outsourced or in-house for the first time, then think about it, look at it, because it can be a good option for you. So yeah, I think it's just about knowing what the trigger points are. But yeah, certainly don't go hiring one SDR by themselves with no experience in managing SDRs or building an SDR program, and hoping that they'll make it work by themselves. If that's your opposite choice, then I think outsourced would be a good option for you. If you're ready to do it properly internally, then absolutely internally can be a great way to go. And I think it's just about making that conscious decision and conscious compromise.
Yeah, and I think my parting thought here is you've got to build the relationship and understand this as an option, and that is available. And I feel really great. And anybody that's considering having that conversation, do reach out with Owen. All individuals that have participated in keeping this community alive online and behind the scenes have been huge advocates, supporting me in the business, and relationships matter. I think, more than ever, what this whole pandemic experience has taught me is the importance of building really good relationships with people, and building that trust, and having confidence that you can go and ask questions. And that's what this has all been about today. Everybody that you've heard speak, connect with them on LinkedIn. We're now going to move into the networking for the next 20 minutes or so. And just, hang around. I know you want to get onto that email. I know you want to get onto the next call. But, that nugget of information can set you up for the week, month, or year. So thank you very much for everybody that spoke today. Thank you for participating as guests. And Owen, virtual round of applause, mate, for hosting this and leading these questions. And if you want to speak about outsourced SDRs, go to Speak to Air. Thank you, everyone. That is a wrap. We are heading to networking. I really wish we could all hang out and have a drink. It's not happening. I'm going to have one by myself this evening. But I'm going to come and say hello in the networking. So it's a wrap, guys. Stay in the networking. Let's have a chat.
Thanks, James.
Take care. Bye-bye.